Voltages of the pins of the Sanyo LC7137 synthesizer IC from 1980s CB radios, and demonstration of a faulty radio which does not match the findings. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So, in my ongoing quest to get this Harvard 420M back to working order, as it should have been as it was built, which is as a CB, so I bought it converted to 10 meters, I've had to take voltages of the Sanyo LC7137 synthesizer used in these things from a known good set, which is, well, the only one I had based on the same chassis to hand is a York JCB861. And that took a lot of time. So I've also had to reference what each pin on the chip does against the data sheet, which is readily available. You can find it out there. And I came up with a bit of a crib sheet. I've handwritten it at the moment. I haven't typed it up because, well, I will type a copy up and you can give it for download. But this is all based on channel 40, which is where you would normally set the VCO anyway. So the only pins I know of that would change voltage would be pins 1 through 6, because depending on the state they are, will depend on what channel the radio's on. So on channel 40, pins 1 through 6 will always read like next to nothing. I got it down as 0.01 volts on this multimeter. So that means I should know what this radio should be on transmit and receive on the LC7137 voltage wise. So I'm going to flip the radio over. Now I've got to do this kind of in a little bit of a mirror, because I've got to be very careful I don't start losing things on the floor, because there is a microphone connected. It's the microphone that came with this radio, which is a power mic, but there's no battery in it, so there'll be no audio. Anyway, so there's the LC7137, and this link here is where I suspected a track might have been cut. So I've put that back in, but that doesn't seem to have been made any difference, because I suspected part of that had been cut as part of the conversion to 10 meters. So the meter is connected to a ground reference inside the radio. It's the bit of metal wire between two of the cans inside, near where you would adjust the VCO. If you've ever watched UK FM CB radio servicing, that's where Richard tends to connect his meter when he's setting the VCO on these radios, which should be on channel 40 about 4 volts, which I'm not getting on this at all. The voltage doesn't even change. So something really is badly wrong here. So we've got the meter and we've got the radio. Radio's not powered up because I've not turned the power supply on. The radio should now be on now. So I'm not going to bother with the receive, but I will, or transmit rather, but I will do the receive. So let's grab my test lead from down below, because I'm using the fixed microphones. I've got to make sure I'm actually where it is. So this is pin 20 here, and on pin 20, according to what I got from the York, that should be 6.59 volts there. It's come up at 6.88. Pin 20 is the transmit receive switch pin, so if I transmit, that voltage will drop. So that pin is working. Pin 19, according to the York, I should have had 3.13 volts. I'm getting about 2.6 volts there. And that is P in. I haven't quite figured out what the function of that is yet. I need to read the data sheet more, but I will probably put a link to the data sheet in the description below. So, next one along. That's 6.29 volts. Pin 18. That's the supply to the chip. That's normal. So about 6 volts in there. That's fine. But it's 6.5 according to the York. It's actually 6.29 here. Next one. 17. That's read 4 volts on the York. It's reading 6.29 on this. So that's too high. It's about nearly 2.3 volts too high. That pin is pin 17, I think we were at. 20, 19, 18, 17. Yeah, so pin 17, so it's losing track, that's called A out. Pin 16 immediately next to it is called A in. There is nothing on that, 0, and according to the York I should have 1.51 volts there. I don't have 1.51 volts here. It's pin 15. 1.52 volts according to the York. Pin 15 is P out, I think. Yeah, looks like it. I've got no volts there either. The York said I should have 1.52. Pin 14. I should have 0 volts there. Pin 14 is labelled LM with a line above it. I'm not an expert at integrated circuits. That does actually slightly change when I transmit. So it obviously does something. So the next pin along, pin 13, 0 volts. It's supposed to read 0 volts. Pin 13 is VSS. Pin 12, which is what's got this on it, 3.19 on here. Should read pin 12 read 3.36 on the York. Pin 11, 2.9 on here, 3.13 on the York. So those are X in, X out, so that's to do with the crystal, I think. So pin 10 on this radio, it's reading 1.2, well, just setting 1.13 there. I got it at 0.23 on the York. 9, which is the channel 9 switching pin, should read nothing. 8 is the channel 19 switching pin, not used on this radio, should do nothing. 7 is a test pin, shouldn't be anything there. And these next pins should all read nothing, since it's on channel 40. Because that's the binary counter that sets the channel. So if one has a voltage and another doesn't, it's kind of how it works. So that's basically the readings I'm getting on receive on this radio compared to what I was getting on the York, which works, which actually does go into transmit, receive, and does everything it's supposed to do. So this is my scribblings here. My handwriting is absolutely terrible, and so is my drawing. Yeah, I'm not particularly good at drawing, especially not with a pen. This was a scrap piece of paper. So these are the transmit voltages I got off the York. So I can go through them as well, but I don't know whether there's any point in doing that because this thing isn't transmitting anyway. So that's roughly what the voltages are on the LC7137. Not ideal that I've got wrong voltages, which means I need to keep finding out what might actually be wrong. So I'm getting like some really strange readings here compared to what I was getting off that York. So I'm just going to pause and I'll show you where the LC7137 is actually located in these. Okay, so you're now looking at the top of the Cybernet 134 chassis circuit board, and we've got this little white object here, which looks like it might be a resistor, I don't know, and just in here, a black thing here with lots of metal legs on it, U1 is the LC7137. I can't see the markings on that very well on the camera screen, but I can if I look at it directly. So this wasn't just used on the Cybernet 134. I'm going to turn this off before I short something out. It was also used in some of the Maxcom chassis, I believe, as well. Can't think of what else it was used in. I think there's a version of the... I think it's the Binatone Route 66, I think. One version has it, another version doesn't, if I recall, from my research on this matter. And I believe it's also in the Cybernet 002F chassis, the one used by the Amstrad 901, and similar radios. I believe that has the LC7137. And I think that's it off the top of my head. There may be others, and a lot of other radios of the era did use a different synthesizer, so obviously completely different pin out, so you couldn't just swap the synthesizers over. If you blew up your LC7137 and wanted to, say, nick the TC9119 from a Uniden, which, to be honest, I wouldn't do that anyway, because I don't even think that's got the same amount of pins on it. I don't know, I've never looked into that. So I'm stumped with why this radio isn't actually going into lock, and more to the point, why the VCO's not working. So I've got this orange wire as well, which I don't know whether that's actually been added for the 10 meter modification or whether that's actually supposed to go to something, because I can't see anything in the York, which I've also got the lid off because I also needed that off to check the voltages. So I know there is an orange wire going to 0.15 off that loom, but it doesn't appear to be one coming off the power switch, so I think that one was added on later. So I know that LC7137 is kind of working. I don't think it's properly working. So there may be a component missing still that I don't know about. So this one's had R118 moved round. I don't know when that was done, but it's working, so it's not too much of an issue. It's got it laid flat on that one. So I am at a bit of a loss. It's a good radio. They're supposed to be good. I'm really not keen on sending this to Richard to be serviced, because I don't really want to spend any money and I don't trust the postman with it. So there you go. And it's just something I want to try and do myself, because I know what I'm doing and I know how to get these things going. It's just this one has me stumped. So my first thoughts are, obviously it's probably something to do with the VCO not running. There's a transistor there, but I don't really want to remove it and test it because it's obviously around the VCO. And also there's probably other components in there as well that might have been affected by that modification, and I don't know how much has been butchered when they actually modified it for 10 meters. If it's been butchered beyond repair, then that's not ideal, but it might help me get a core for this York that I've got up here on the top of the printer, should the need arise for me to unfortunately use it for parts, which I really don't want to do, because I do like these old 80s rigs, and I'm firmly under the belief that we need as many of them to survive as possible. So hope the information on the LC7137 has been of some help. So I'll go through the pin assignments again. So that's my rather horrible drawing of the 7137. So let's see. So pins 1 through 6 as the binary counter for your channels. So depending on the state of those, the voltage on them will depend on what channel the radio is set at. I measured this at channel 40, so all of those are reading about 0 volts. Pin 7 is a test pin, which isn't used. Pin 8 is a channel 19 switching pin. Pin 9 switches to channel 9, which this radio does have implemented, and that facility is working, is switching to channel 9. 10 is labelled MC, that's with a line above the label. There is information on what that's supposed to do in the data sheet. So pin 11, X in, pin 12, X out, which I believe is to do with the crystal. Pin 13, VSS. That, my measurements on that York showed it with no volts. Pin 14, LM, that showed no volts on receive, but on the York it showed about 5 volts on transmit. So that obviously does change state when the transmitter's operating. 15, P out, That showed about 1.5 volts when receiving, and something similar when transmitting, so I didn't change the state. A in is on pin 16, 1.5 volts, give or take, 1.51 I've written it down as, on receive. Something similar on transmit, it was 1.48. 17 showed 4.37 on transmit, but it shows on receive 4. Pin 17 is A out. Pin 18 is the voltage supplied to the chip. So as long as that's there, then the chip's running. 19 is P in, which is the opposite to the P out on pin 15. That's the input. The other one's the output. I'm trying to find the voltage I got for that. 3.13 volts on receive on the York, and the same on a transmit. 20 is the transmit receive switching. 6.59 on receive, 0.81 on transmit. So that's pretty much, I'm turning my meter off, it's showing a low battery. So that's pretty much the pin out and the voltages of the LC7137. So hope that was of some information. I'm going to attach a link to the datasheet because the datasheet is widely available. So if you want to reference the datasheet, if you're ever trying to repair one of these old radios and need to know what the voltages are as well, I'll put this little chart of voltages as a download somewhere. I'll have to type it up, but that's pretty much it. The voltages on this do not match what I should get, what I've been getting off the York, which is just up there, which I'm a little bit disappointed about because I really wanted to get this set back to normal, and at the moment, yeah, that doesn't look as though it's going to happen. So if you've been, thank you for watching. If you have been, Paul, Mike 0, Whiskey November uniform, or 26 Charlie Tango 730 if you catch me on 11 metres and PMR 446, or just the red squirrel on the old CB and PMR 446 if you like. And, you know, it's nice to get these working, but this one really has me stumped. It has been proving a nightmare. So, hopefully this chart of voltages will be of some help, and hopefully I'll get it working at some point. But in the meantime, well, keep troubleshooting it, I suppose. So, 7-3 for now, and I'll catch you in the next one.